Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles to the Angelo Robles podcast. I'm also the founder at Family Office Association. Today, we're going to discuss building a Bitcoin mining empire. It features Jerry Tang, CEO of VCV Digital. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Angelo.
Well, as many of you know, we've covered crypto extensively for probably about a year and a half now, and certainly Bitcoin. But I don't think in the 100+ shows that I've done that have been somewhat crypto-centric, I've ever done anything on mining, let alone Bitcoin mining, the most prominent. So this will be an interesting discussion. I have new questions to ask that I haven't asked yet. And here we go. Jerry, why don't I start with, what does Bitcoin mean to you?
In my mind, Bitcoin, I think, is the most important invention in 21st century so far. It gives people a way to distribute value across internet, borderless, without any censorship of any authority or government. I think is the most genius invention for a long time. I think this is an era-defining invention.
Those are big words. I love it, Jerry. You come out swinging for the fences. I like that a lot. So really, in the last 22 years, this is the biggest invention that you've seen, one that could be global and game-changing. And I think over the last 12, 13 years has somewhat proven to be that. And everything you just said, assuming it stays in that direction, I certainly would concur and agree with. Will quantum, we're getting into a little bit of technicalities of, I guess, what could go wrong here, but will quantum or even currently factoring algorithms crack Bitcoin, probably more specifically the keys to wallets?
Well, that's a very technical question. I think you need to kind of define what's a wallet, what's the key. To put it in simple English language, a key is a password that you use to open a safe. Let's say you have a value or money in a safe. The key is to the safe. So right now, the safe we're using is called SHA-256.
Right, shot.
That was developed by the US military.
Indeed it was.
We encode messages between the general and the soldiers and the different military units, how to coordinate without being discovered by enemies. The military in the late 90s actually published this algorithm called SHA-256. They were so confident that nobody can really crack this or hack this algorithm that they published to the public. Here's why. What this means is SHA-256 is 2 to the 256 power, which is a very large number. That's 10 to the 77 power. Imagine that a number in your head. Think about a billion and think about many, many billions of billions. So right now, based on current technology, in order to crack that, it would take 1 million years.
Now, that would be a long time.
Now you mentioned
that's how we currently stand.
Right, you mentioned quantum computing. Yes, it's under development. Google, I think the Chinese government, they have made some inroad into quantum computing. We think, commercialization will be in the 2030s. It's possible that a quantum computing can potentially crack one part of the wallet, okay, which is the consensus algorithm part.
Yes.
We think cracking the wallet itself is impossible, even with quantum computing.
I'm assuming we'll also develop quantum defenses. So there'll be strategies that could be implemented as advancements in technology are evolving, the US government, et cetera.
Exactly. Yes, so instead of using 2 to the power 256, we can use 2 to the power of 10,000, 1 million.
Right, right. No, no, those are very good answers. I'm probably a little more concerned about even right now factoring algorithms and really a nation state if they were to put massive resources behind it, which would make no sense. But in theory, I mean, I'm always a little bit skeptical and eyes open as to what could go wrong. But the reality is, if there is a technology brewing like that, there's a lot more to worry about than just cryptocurrencies. You could have titles changed on land that are filed digitally, stock certificates, all are much, much, much bigger than crypto currently is. In 10, 20 years, who knows? It's interesting times we're living in, Jerry. uh, is the Lightning Network secure and is it really decentralized?
Well, what is Lightning Network? It's basically a way to accumulate smaller transactions because Bitcoin is efficient with larger transactions. It can only process limited number of transactions per every second. So Lightning Network is a way to increase the volume of transactions the network can process. In order to do that, basically you create a second layer to channel smaller transactions through the base network. So there's definitely a small sacrifice of decentralization, just because you're, as I said, you're aggregating. But for smaller transactions, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the way that I feel too. The power of Bitcoin to me, and you hinted at it earlier when you said it was game changing in this century, is that appears to be truly decentralized and very intriguing from that perspective. Are we giving up a little bit because it is so slow? It's the proof of work and all things we'll get into a little bit later and how it relates to Bitcoin mining. I suppose we are giving up a little bit from that perspective of the Lightning Network, but to make it more everyday transactional and grow and scale more globally, there probably is no other way. So again, everything comes with, I guess, positives or negatives, but I find that intriguing. A bit of a technical question relative to, I guess, Bitcoin and mining. Let's jump into it. Explain to our audience what are slush pools and stratum addresses?
Slush pools is a particular pool that's amongst the dozens of mining pools there are in the world. What is a mining pool? So in my estimation, there are probably 2 million machines competing for the Bitcoin reward. Every 10 minutes, the network will generate 6.25 Bitcoins, okay? So it's like every 10 minutes, there's a one lottery tickets being picked amongst of millions of machines, which is if you own one machine, the probability of you getting a Bitcoin reward is very, very low. It will take years for you to get some rewards. So what happened is machines, they team up into a mining pool. So Angelo, let's say you have 10,000 Bitcoin miners. I have 10,000. We team up. We have a higher probability of getting some rewards. So these are called mining pools. That would guarantee a more stable revenue. In reality, these pools will have hundreds of thousands of machines. So when you look at the reward for each miner or machines, you see a straight line on a daily basis.
That's true. I mean, from my limited knowledge relative of mining, although I've looked into it, that would be I think a good description. What do you think about putting environmental, social, and governance (ESG) features front and center when mining Bitcoin?
Yeah, this is the question I'm most excited about, actually. And that's where, I think we will differentiate ourselves from all the other mining companies. Right now, there's a lot of criticism on Bitcoin mining because it consumes a lot of energy. By country ranking, Bitcoin mining ranks about 120 in the world as a energy consumer. So right between Nigeria, sorry, not Nigeria, right between Ethiopia and Netherlands. Okay, so and a lot of mining companies, there are a bunch of public mining companies and the large private ones. All they do is they look at this as a passive expense line item. Okay, they claim, okay, they have a certain percentage of their power coming from renewable. That's most of the mining companies do. What I see is a flexible, substantial energy user generating revenue. What that means is that we can pair up crypto data center, Bitcoin mining with renewable generation assets such as solar, such as wind, and create a integrated ecosystem that would make money both in renewable assets and also mining, and accelerate the renewable energy transition. As you know, I think Brookfield predicts 3.5 trillion to be invested every year into renewable. So we believe there's a lot of potential investors for solar and wind assets. If we can develop these assets by having a captive, substantial, and flexible energy user and develop them fast, this can be a very, very good business.
Oh, for sure. And a little later in the interview, we're going to get to proof of work versus proof of stake and hybrid and possibly how certain things are changing. So I'll leave that hanging a little bit, but I will ask institutional investors, I would say they're somewhat chomping on the bit to get more active broadly in crypto. You do have the issue of them being held to an ESG standard that is possibly for some making it more limited to invest in Bitcoin currently. I'm not so sure that there may not be central banks that have an interest. But again, the issue of the perception of the energy consumption is an issue. You could argue SEC regulation that was partially answered by the executive order of the president that probably wasn't quite as bad as maybe some of us thought it was going to be. But my big picture question to you is, what is it going to take for institutions and more El Salvadors and sovereign nations to start adopting and being active in Bitcoin?
Let me tell you something kind of like a firsthand what I see on the ground. So sometimes we finance these Bitcoin mining machines, and recently we have gotten a lot of interest from big name asset managers based in the US. These are top 10, top 20 asset managers that are wanting to finance my machines. So I think the interest level is already very high from institutions. And the mining is a sort of a neutral thing for them because they don't own the Bitcoins, they own the machines or finance the machines. So it's very interesting happening right now.
Yeah, the fact that they're showing interest in that and seeing the opportunity. And we'll get to the other things that I mentioned earlier. I think it's inevitable that basically, again, sovereign central banks and institutional investors are going to start coming in. And it's probably not going to trickle. It's going to happen, I think, relatively quickly. That, interesting times around the world we're living in now. And who knows? No one has a crystal ball relative to Bitcoin, crypto, or anything. But I think you could kind of put two and two together and look at it longer term. There's very intriguing opportunity here. It's a related question in a way. Will the market cap of Bitcoin miners eventually surpass gold miners?
I believe so. Just from my perspective as Bitcoin miner, I believe it's bound to happen. First of all, if people actually did some serious work on the ESG impact of gold mining, people will be appalled.
Yes.
The amount of energy people use in gold mining and also the actual pollution it causes. Bitcoin mining doesn't really cause any air pollution versus gold mining. It's appalling. So and also Bitcoin just by every aspect is much better store of value than gold. Limited supply, predictable supply, and it's all mathematical. There's no risk of having a small planet, being discovered by Elon Musk with full of gold. There's no such risk.
Yeah, we hear about those asteroids.
What if he mines gold in Mars?
Yeah, actually, a lot of interesting follow-up questions to that, including store value. But why don't we maybe save that one, if not till later, to perhaps a different interview? Because that is one, although I have more Bitcoin than I have gold, that I think we could have gone a little back and forth on. But we'll shelve that to either later or a different time. Would you consider the reclamation of coal refuse sites a viable method of clean and environmentally friendly Bitcoin mining?
I wouldn't. I know exactly what this is. Basically, you have a piles of coal sitting on the ground, and you burn this coal. You claim, you are burning wasted coal that would otherwise potentially pollute the air anyways. So it's clean and environmental friendly. I don't buy that. It's kind of in the area, gray area.
I hear you. Is hydropower the cleanest energy source for Bitcoin mining?
I think there's nothing that's cleanest, right? I guess you can make an argument that the production of solar panels or wind turbines could produce carbon dioxide. But hydropower, you need to build dams. Dams are made of cement. Cement also produce quite a bit of carbon dioxide. So to be honest with you, I think if you really want to like a cleanest, I believe a nuclear is the cleanest energy on
Probably.
a per megawatt basis.
What's your take on using flared natural gas?
If it's strictly natural gas, that's gonna leak anyways, no matter what. I think that's good for the earth, and that natural gas has a lot of methane, and most people probably don't know methane is 40 times, 80 times worse than CO2. So if it's natural gas that's going to be leaked anyways, and you use them to produce electricity, I think that's a very, very good for. However, I do believe there's a bunch of guys claiming they're using flared natural gas. Instead, they're just using gas that were trapped, and they are taking it out of the earth. So that's kind of different. We need to be very careful in discerning, that and the real flaring gas.
Very good point. Recently, block subsidies constituted about 99% of hash-based revenue as transaction fees, which continue to stay low. What will happen after the big question there? What will happen after all 21 million Bitcoin in 104 years are mined?
Exactly. I think the last Bitcoin will be mined in 2041, right? So although I would say it's a more pressing thing than 2141 because, as you know, the rewards or subsidies they halve every 4 years. So right now it's 900 bitcoins a day roughly. It will go down to 450 bitcoins in 2024, and in another 4 years it will be 225 bitcoins per day. So we really need the adoption of Bitcoin as a value exchange to increase the transaction fee component
Right.
to make mining sustainable. But this is a free market. the economics always figure itself out. I think that's the beauty of a Bitcoin network.
And yeah, I mean, I know some people are going to say, Angelo, that's what, 103 years from now. But nonetheless, maybe we're going to live to be hundreds of years old. I want to know. And that is, I think, a fair question. And you're correct. We don't need to solve it now. I have some opinions on that one as well. But again, we'll save that for round two. Uh, Bitcoin mining continues to become more and more competitive. What's the secret to long-term survival?
Yeah, you are exactly right. It's very, very competitive. It's like, basically if you have a money printer, you can print money. Everybody else would want to have their money printed as well. So more and more machines that can mine Bitcoin will be made just because the economics is very, very attractive, right? In order to survive long term, you need a scale. You need a scale. Uh, that will give you lower electricity rate. That accounts for over 90% of expenses in mining Bitcoin.
Right.
And that gives you a lower cost of capital in financing and equity. You can take the company public if public evaluation is very attractive. But many benefits to have a scale.
Explain the importance of a revenue per hash.
Good question. So that's a measurement. Basically, when you purchase machines, you look at how much money you would make every day or every month, and you calculate based on the price you offered, how many days you need to mine to get your money back. So right now, for example, the price per hash, that's the machine price kind of jargon. Price per hash is between $65 to $75. So that means if your return of investment is a 12 months horizon, you want to make $5 to $6 a month.
A bit of some deep questions coming up. Bitmain's two bleeding edge miners, the S19 XP and the S19 Pro plus Hydro at Intel's BMZ2, if I have that correct, are all nearing market round similar dates. Maybe explain the pros and cons of each.
For us, again, we look at the revenue per hash very closely versus the price per hash. That's how long it takes for you to get your money back. It's great to buy the latest and greatest machines, but if the price doesn't make sense from a return of investment perspective, we rather stick to a lesser model. But to answer your question, the XP model is using the next generation chips. I believe they're using 3 nanometer chips. Pros are using 5 nanometer chips. And the Pros Hydro is basically a overclocked regular Pro machine because they use the liquid cooling to make the machines more efficient in heat dissemination. So they achieve more hash rate per chip by doing that. I would say I don't know much about Intel's BMZ2. From what I hear from my friends in Taiwan, and they are very close to these chip manufacturers, and they have some inside information, they think the BMZ2 is one generation behind, probably 2-3 years behind Bitmain.
Yes, you mentioned something. I'm going to hit upon it. Why is hash rate an important metric in measuring a miner's performance?
That's a great question. And the hash rate is the H, if you recall the SHA-256. That's the secure hash algorithm. So hash means making a calculation, a mathematical calculation that's specific to this algorithm. So hash rate means if you have a, for example, S19XP has 150 terahash, it means it can make 150 tera hash rate in 1 second. So that measures the speed that the computer can make the calculation that's important for the mining process.
Explain difficulty, dollar per terahash, and even what exa hash to our listeners.
Yeah, difficulty is basically the inverse of hash rate or global hash rate. When you have more machines or more hash rate, the network difficulty will go up. What that means is when you make a calculation, you need to make more guesses, which makes the hashing more difficult. And the dollar per hash rate is basically the revenue, measured in dollar terms. That would obviously depends on the price of BTC. Exahash means 100 million terahash. So right now, I think the network has over 200 exahash or 200 million terahash in the universe.
Explain the importance in what you do in mining of cooling systems.
It's everything in the mining machines cooling. Think about a computer. Think about the computer running 24/7, non-stop for years and years. It's paramount to keep the machine cool so it can be functional. So these mining machines, they actually come with appropriate fans. Okay, then they have heat sinks and fans to disseminate the heat in an efficient way. Plus, the data center they are in needs to have appropriate heat dissemination as well. So usually they have fans. They have sometimes they have a liquid cooling device to make the machines more kind of cooler, so they can produce.
And yeah, that was really important. And that is the correct answer. Cooling systems are basically everything. How do you plan to improve Bitcoin production by increasing, going back to that word, hash rate?
One simple and a brutal force way is just to buy more machines. You buy machines, you buy a hash rate. That's what it means, right?
Yep.
So that involves a lot of capital. It's a capital-heavy business. For every, as I said, for every terahash, you pay $65 to $75. If you want, 1 exahash, for example, it will cost you a fortune, over $100 million probably. There are other ways to do it. One way we're thinking about is doing liquid cooling. We dunk the machines into mineral oil that has a heat circulation system, which has a lot more efficiency in heat dissemination. So we can overclock these miners. Overclocking means they run at a higher frequency than the specified frequency, which means they can make more calculations.
I mean, I guess you hinted at it earlier, but just for, and 99% of us even active in Bitcoin are going to be lay people relative to some of the issues we're talking about now in mining. But the earlier stages, 2009 through a couple of years in, yeah, you probably had some of the degens and the cyberpunks and, with their computer and doing their thing mining. I mean, that's way, way harder now. Like what we spoke about earlier with slush pools and mining companies. I mean, that might have had its run in the first 1 to 3, maybe even 5 years. But now it's become incredibly competitive. It's harder. And you need to have a level of being somewhat institutional, I would say, in terms of what you're doing to be profitable at this.
That's exactly right, and a lot of people they don't appreciate this. These machines are monsters.
Yes.
Are
That's why
monsters.
cooling is so important.
So, for example, one interesting fact, and I have to somebody needs to check that, but I think it's true is if you aggregate all the cloud computing data centers that are out there, if you include all Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Apple, they account for less than 1%. They can only make less than 1% of the hash rate of the Bitcoin network mining machines. These machines are very, very specialized in what they do. They only do one thing. They don't claim to do anything else. They only do the SHA-256 calculations. So you need to own these machines, and sourcing the machine, number one, is not easy for most people, and they're very expensive. Each machine could cost you $10,000. So
Oh,
you have to become institutionalized. Now there are ways for regular people to participate in this. You can buy the public companies, or you can buy machines hosted in other people's sites. You need to pay a premium, obviously, but
right.
nonetheless, it could be a very, very good investment.
Yeah, for those interested broadly in crypto and specifically Bitcoin, there are other ways to get exposure to the, let's call it the price action of Bitcoin without actually owning it per se. And we'll get a little bit more into that shortly, although it's pretty obvious from the mining company perspective, that would be one. Explain the advantages of being a vertically integrated mining company.
Can you define what that means? Do you mean that we make our own machines?
I could go that direction, yes.
And do you mean we also organize our own mining pools? Because in the
Yes.
value chain, you have a manufacturer, you have the mining companies, you have the pool operators, right? These are the three main actors.
Yes, I would say so. Correct.
I think so. Listen, I mean, right now, as I said, the machines are super expensive, but guess what's the cost? The cost of these machines really making them is less than 10% of the price. It's a super high margin business. So if you can cut through that, I think you can become pretty profitable.
We're getting now, Jerry, to a very important question that, again, depending on how deeply ingrained many of our viewers or listeners are in the world of Bitcoin and the community, it may mean different things to them. But I'll build it up a little bit. We all know there's tremendous pressures to go ESG, to go clean. And you have the proof of work versus proof of stake consensus mechanism, which we don't have to do a deep dive into. But proof of work is Bitcoin, and that helps to keep it, especially at its current scale. Let's go with the word decentralized to live up to the true potential of what Satoshi's vision was. So now the issue is there going to be forces at work, very powerful in the clean energy movement and for eventually greater institutional adoption for Bitcoin to change its consensus mechanism? I know the maximalists are cringing as I say this, and what it would take to change the consensus mechanism. I'm not going to say quite go proof of stake. That will really drive them crazy, but maybe, maybe some form of hybrid. Is this inevitable?
I would say maybe. Listen, what's the market cap of Bitcoin in any given day? About a trillion. Today might be 800 billion.
Right.
It's $1 trillion. You can call it a company or a network. In the future, it could become 5 trillion, 10 trillion. What happens in these really large market cap things is there's a lot of inertia. Just by nature of it, when so much money is on the line, is at stake, making a change would entail potentially a lot of risk. I don't think I think the inertia is big enough. I think making any meaningful change to Bitcoin can be very, very difficult. It's just too much money on at the stake. I mean, on the table. Um, can it adapt into a hybrid model? Potentially, I think it's unlikely. But Bitcoin doesn't need to be proof of stake, I believe. I think with our business model and Bitcoin's capability of being a flexible, substantial energy user, we can accelerate renewable energy transition through Bitcoin mining. We
I,
don't need to.
I'm sorry, Jerry. I mentioned earlier the President Biden's, I guess, executive order coming through, and we're now in early March, I guess I would call it. And now, again, being a libertarian, I really don't want any regulation. So for me, I don't like it. But could it have been worse? Yeah, I suppose we'll see how it evolves. But I guess it could have been worse. What's your general read as someone who's looking to really scale up and be obviously incredibly active in the most important cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, in our ecosystem? What's your early opinion, 24, 36 hours later? And does this cause you to put the pedal to the metal more or to pull back a little bit?
I think it's the former rather than the latter because the fact the president issued such an executive order means crypto as an ecosystem has risen to a level of importance that the president made a specific order on regulating. And I think in one of his points, he wanted to cultivate the innovation in the crypto and the financial system. So I think this is generally a positive thing.
Yes. I mean, I guess I could put that spin on it about innovation, the US being competitive globally. And you're too young, but these are discussions that I do remember 30 years ago relative to the internet and certain controls and guardrails around that. Luckily, that, well, some will argue maybe not, but luckily, in my opinion, those didn't really happen. And that allowed freedom and entrepreneurship and for eventually a democratic system to make their own decision, interested or buying or not. Uh, there was an aspect of the executive order that definitely caught my attention. We're going to enter into a bit of a touchy subject now, Jerry. And I think it's inevitable, but maybe we'll take some time. And that effectively is central bank digital currencies. Uh, and the question for you, you can answer it in any way you want, but is central bank digital currencies going to be bad, maybe a death blow potentially for Bitcoin?
I don't think so. Listen, CBDC is, I don't like CBDC, to be honest with you.
I hate it.
Just think about all the things governments can do with CBDC, For example, if they don't like you, even if you have money, they can program in such a way you can't buy anything.
100%. And
You
we
know,
see what's going on now with right or wrong in the US and EU with, let's call it the Russian oligarchs, that money offshore, boom. Even without this, they're freezing that, which I don't think is a democratic perspective, just my opinion. But oh, central bank digital currencies, you couldn't make it any easier for governments to do exactly what you just said, which I phrased it a little differently, freezing your assets.
Listen, it all started with 911, I think. After 911, US government instituted a lot of controls around the currency, cross-border exchanges. Um, I think CBDC is gonna help to sterilize that, make it a more robust the regulation and all the watchful eyes from government more effective. So I think it's a better thing. However, on the contrary, I think people desire freedom. Okay, value will flow to things that generally have more liberty and freedom. So if you have this effective CBDC, which is questionable whether or not U.S. government can pull off a effective, nicely programmed digital currency. There's a question mark there. Okay, governments are generally not good at programming or inventing new things, new features. They're good at control. So I think a lot of the population may desire the freedom that Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies can offer to them because they are censorship resistant. Who do you even go to ask them to shut off the Bitcoin network? Nobody.
That's correct. And what is decentralized? It means there's no single point of failure. There's no CEO to put in jail. There's no one computer system to shut down. Now, I could argue on and off ramps, nodes. We won't get too deeply into that. If they really wanted to mess it up, especially the US, I suppose they could, but that wouldn't kill it. And that brings me to my next question. I have various experts on. Some I will say heavily, let's call it pro Bitcoin, and maybe others like Peter Schiff that are not. So when I ask them for a price prediction, of course, we all both cringe and get a little excited because we all want to hear that. So you ask someone like Peter or others, they'll tell you zero. Now I'll tell them with the volume of active users, in theory, it could really not go to zero. It may go down a hell of a lot, but not theoretically to zero. But let's run with the zero. I've had others on, let's call them hardcore, well-known maximalists that say, oh, within 10 years, $5 million a coin. That'd be what, like about 100x relative to where we are now. So I'm asking you, maybe looking out over the years to come, and you may want to define that as 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. Could you make a case for the Bitcoin price, either hopefully not going terribly down, but going up, and by what multiple?
I think it's gonna be 10 to 20 trillion in market cap. That means half a million to a million price in the next
Right.
whatever, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. It's gonna reach there, right?
I hope so. Hopefully more. But,
Well,
but if I had a sign on the dotted line now for what you said, relative to my diversity that I own in the ecosystem, which is much, much deeper than Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, I would probably sign on that now. That would sound pretty good to me, Jerry. Maybe one final question that may go in interesting directions. You brought up, now Michael Saylor got this question from me, Plan B, Robert Breedlove, everyone. No one really likes it. And I get more hate emails and responses back on this than anything else that I do from the community. But you did mention SHA-56. I didn't have to prompt it. And you're correct, relative to the CIA and the US military back 25 years ago. SHA-256 effectively was probably a vision for the Satoshi, whoever he or she or variety of people are. Some will argue, possibly if it's multiple people, was the US government involved? As much as you want to disclose all the secrets that you know, Jerry, if you could maybe give us some insight to my question. Who is Satoshi? And you can't say it doesn't matter.
Fine. In that vein, I have met several guys in Dubai, in Hong Kong. They all claim themselves to be Satoshi, which
Well, they could be kidnapped and they're $50 billion of BTC. So I don't think they'd be chirping their mouth like that.
That's the one account which has almost a million BTC, right? That must be Satoshi. But I think listen. There are 2, 3 people that are really mattered in the invention of Bitcoin. You have Adam Back, who invented the email spam consensus algorithm, and then you have Bai Wei, who had the digital cash, and then you have obviously the famous Hall Finney. I think personally, Hall is probably Satoshi. If you look at that wallet, it became dormant for many, many years.
And he passed away, what was
Now, passed away
2014?
around 2014.
Yeah,
And interestingly, he put his body or brain into a frozen state. So
right.
in a later time, maybe people can figure it out and revive him. And assuming he has, by then, will be the richest person on earth, he will be afford to do that.
All
That
very
will make a
true.
very good Hollywood movie. So,
Oh, you're going to allow me to write a good tale right now. I mean, I would probably agree with that. Those probably would be about the three. There's an other gentleman I'm thinking of. I can't think of his
Pablo,
name.
probably.
Uh, Going back to the 80s and 90s in cryptography. Uh, Damn it, it's escaping me. But probably Hal Finney seems to rise to the top. But I don't think it's one. He may be the lead or was the lead.
Right, right.
I think it was likely multiple. The fact that they've been able to keep their mouth shut is shocking because anytime more than one person knows a secret, good luck trying to keep it. So that I admit I find totally fascinating. And good point on the Hal Finney, who passed away ballpark 2014, assuming it was him, and that would be what, $50 billion of Bitcoin or something like that. Not a penny has been moved from that. So you would assume that even his family didn't really know. And the keys, assuming it was him, kind of died with him.
Right. I don't know. I think somebody has the key, and one day it will be revived, and he will be saved from the dormant state, and could make a great, great Hollywood story.
Well, a very important question for you, Jerry, then relative to that. Do you think there's an element of Bitcoin maximalism that if ever a cent or one Satoshi was moved from the Bitcoin, it would cause from that, whatever, the Genesis block or what we're describing, it would cause a, let's call it a loss of faith in the community?
I don't think so. I don't think the founder is as important at this point, since now it's pretty decentralized, right? It took a few years to I guess, accomplish the decentralization process. I think now network is robust enough to withstand many, many things. Think
For
about it,
sure.
China.
Now, for those listening live, and I guess we'll maybe watch this on video, we are going to have Jerry back in a private interview session for my members and qualified purchasers to discuss an opportunity that he's building out that could be a way to be active effectively in Bitcoin mining. So stay tuned. If you don't get something from me in the next week or two, feel free to reach out. That may be privately recorded, but will not be up on a public platform. But to cue that up a little bit, Jerry, give our audience a little bit of insight relative to potentially what you look to do to build, as I called it, not you, so I'm the arrogant one, the empire. Maybe whet their appetite a little bit so they'll be ready for that private interview that we're going to do in a couple of more weeks with an intimate live audience and privately distributed again to effectively the family offices.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we'll be the first company at the cross section of crypto data center and renewable development. Two very, very fast growing sectors. The first integrated mining company and renewable development company out there.
Wow. Yeah, no, that would, from what I've learned about it, yeah, I mean, I'm impressed by Jerry and what him and his organization are doing. I think learning more about Bitcoin mining and potentially being involved in the grand vision that he has, I think could be very intriguing to at least explore. Jerry Tang, by the way, everyone, Tang, CEO of VCV. Jerry, maybe give us a couple of seconds on what is VCV.
So VCV really stands for Value Chain Ventures. When we started the company, that's our name, and then we ran into another company who has the same name, so we changed the company name to VCV Digital. We have a mining business. We have a data center infrastructure business. We have a solutions business. We actually own stakes in manufacturers of certain key equipments in the mining process. We also have a early stage and a Series A investment fund into crypto projects or companies.
Mhm.
So what we want to do is create a conglomerate in the crypto space.
Oh, you sure do. And when you do that, and I know you will, of course, you're going to have your own single family office and you're going to join family office associations. So we have it all figured out in the next, I'm going to give it only 5 years. How about that?
You'll be surprised in the crypto space.
Oh, yeah, 5 years might actually be just way too long. In crypto years, that's probably going to feel like 100. So maybe a lot sooner. Well, everyone, it's been really a pleasure to have an opportunity to interview Jerry Tang, CEO, as noted, of VCV. Really enjoyed it. Look forward to follow-up conversations and that a private interview that we're doing to learn more about the opportunity that he briefly noted or whetted our appetite and described. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of the Angelo Robles podcast. I'm the founder at Family Office Association. Very active on social media. We're family, or I am Angelo Robles Meta on Instagram. We're Family Office on YouTube. And simply, of course, my core company, just go to familyofficeassociation.com. Jerry, although we're kind of whetting their appetite for that kind of that private part two, as I'm calling it, those that may want to reach out to you or someone from your team, is there a website or an email at VCV that they could connect with?
It's simply vcvdigital.com. And my email is jerry.tang, again, Tang at vcvdigital.com.
Okay, that's easy. That's very simple and straightforward. Jerry, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you to our live attendees today, those that watch and listen to it in the future. We hope you enjoyed it and look forward to the next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew.
Pleasure.